Okay, so there's this secret author working in newsrooms all across the country. And chances are, you are reading their work maybe every single day. We're talking about artificial intelligence. But just how much of the news you read isn't actually written by a human anymore? Well, a new study went looking for the answer. And honestly, what they found is pretty wild. Let's get into it.
Just think about it for a second. That news story you clicked on this morning. Could you tell for sure if those words were put together by a journalist or if they were generated by an algorithm? You know, this isn't some far-off sci-fi idea anymore. It's happening right now, kind of quietly in the background of modern media. And it makes you wonder, what are we really reading?
And that's exactly where our story starts. A team of researchers decided to launch this massive digital investigation. They basically went undercover, auditing American newspapers to figure out just how common this whole thing has become. They were kind of like detectives hunting for the ghost in the machine.
All right, first things first. To really get a handle on this, the researchers needed to see the big picture. They had to understand the sheer scale of AI use. And to pull that off, they needed a mind-boggling amount of data.
And when I say a lot of data, I mean a lot. The scale of this thing was just enormous. They looked at nearly 200,000 articles from over 1,500 different newspapers, all published in just a few months. So this wasn't just some random spot check. It was a full-on forensic sweep of the entire media landscape.
So, this leads to the million-dollar question, right? They ran every single one of those articles through a really advanced AI detector. These tools are pretty cool. They look for these subtle little patterns, word choices, sentence rhythms, things that are just a little too predictable to sound truly human. So what do you think? What percentage did they find?
9%. Almost 1 out of every 10 articles they looked at showed some serious signs of being AI-generated. A number like that tells you that AI isn't some tiny little tool for a couple of websites. Now, it's already a widespread active author out there in the world of journalism.
But here's where the story gets a little more complex. The researchers quickly realized that AI wasn't being used in the same way everywhere. See, where the AI pops up is just as interesting as how often.
Now, a really clear pattern started to show up. This AI-generated content was way more common in smaller, local papers, which kind of makes sense, right? They're probably trying to stretch their limited resources. It also showed up a ton for specific data-heavy topics, things like financial reports, weather forecasts, tech updates, areas where it's pretty easy for an algorithm to just turn a bunch of numbers into a story.
Okay, look, automated weather reports, I get it. That makes sense. But the investigation took a really shocking turn when the researchers pointed their tools at what should be the most human part of any newspaper, the opinion section.
And we're not talking about small local papers here. They focused on the absolute heavy hitters, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. These are the places where public debate happens, where you go to read a unique human perspective on the issues of the day.
So what they did was clever. They set a baseline using the regular news articles from these same big-name papers. And then they asked, okay, compared to that baseline, how much more likely is it that an opinion piece, an article that is literally all about a person's point of view, would get flagged for AI use? The answer is a total bombshell, 6.4 times more likely. The very articles we read to understand a person's unique thoughts, their arguments, their passions, were over 6 times more likely to have machine-generated text in them. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around. And then, here's the kicker. The study points out that a lot of these flagged op-eds were written by, or at least had the names of, prominent public figures on them. And that just opens up a whole new can of worms, doesn't it? Are they using it to get a first draft going, to just polish up their writing? And does it change how authentic the piece is if the words didn't really come from them?
Which brings us to the most crucial point. Look, using AI as a tool to help you write isn't necessarily the problem here. The real issue, the one that this whole investigation boils down to, is whether anyone is telling you, the reader, that they're using it.
So to get to the bottom of it, the team did one last check. They took a random sample of 100 articles that their AI detector had already flagged, and they sat down and read through every single one by hand. They were looking for just one thing. Any fine print, any editor's note, any little sentence at all that said, hey, we used AI to help create this.
And this visual really says it all. Out of 100 articles that had clear signs of AI writing, a staggering 95, had absolutely zero disclosure, nothing.
Only 5% were transparent with their readers. 95% were not.
So what does this all mean? Where does this leave us? This isn't just a tech story, you know? It's about the fundamental promise between a publication and its audience. It's about trust, the very foundation of how we consume information.
The researchers themselves said it best. They concluded that all of this points to an immediate need for greater transparency and updated editorial standards. Because without those things, public trust is in real danger. And this matters. It matters because if you don't know who or what is writing the news, it starts to chip away at the belief that you're getting the real story from a real person.
And that kind of leaves us with one big final question. As AI just becomes a normal tool for writers everywhere, where do we draw the line? Is a little disclosure note at the bottom of the page enough? Or do you, as the reader, have a basic right to know exactly who or what is behind the words that you're reading every single day?